After suffering a loss to the Tennessee Titans once again, the second time in 2020, and getting destroyed by Derrick Henry 2 times in a row, are the Baltimore Ravens even going to make the playoffs? This question is a silly question, but we look at every other team in the wild card spots, and the Ravens aren't even in the top 7 teams in the AFC. The Ravens, pending a Colts loss, would then go to number 8 in the AFC, and if the Colts win, they would remain at number 9. Now, many people, not including me, thought this team was going to represent the first seed in the AFC, and they're currently 3rd place in the AFC North behind the Cleveland Browns with a 7-3 record and the Steelers with a 10-0 record. So, with this silly question coming in, are the Ravens even going to make the playoffs? That is right. Is this team that was favored to be the first seed going to miss the playoffs? Because every other team in the wild card basically has an advantage over them right now. Well, let's look at the rest of the Ravens' schedule and let's see how many games they should win. So, they just lost to the Titans and they lost to the Patriots the week before. Embarrassing enough. But the following week after this Titans loss, they play the Steelers. And they aren't beating the Steelers, sorry. This is Thursday Night Football. Steelers got this in the bag. That would then lead this team to a 6-5 record. The following week, they host the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football once again. And that should be a win. The Cowboys are horrible. But this is where it gets very interesting. Probably the most important game of the Ravens season right here coming up against the Cleveland Browns. This game is once again on prime time, Sunday or Monday Night Football, can't see. But this game's very important because Cleveland is currently ahead of them in the division. Cleveland's 7-3 somehow because honestly their opponents are just dog trash. And that's the same for the Steelers and the Ravens. Like, their opponents are horrible. But the Browns have somehow clutched up a couple of wins and they're 7-3. If the Ravens at this point in time, like I said, they should lose to the Steelers, beat the Cowboys. That means they would be 7-5. With that in mind, we have to look at Cleveland. They play the Jaguars next week. They'll probably win that game. And the following week, they go on the road and they play the Titans. And I think they're going to fall in that game. So that means when the Ravens and Browns play each other, their records, respectively, the Ravens will be 7-5. And the Browns will be 8-4. If Baltimore wins this game, that means they've swept Cleveland over the year, and they'll basically win any tiebreaker over them if they finish the season with the same record. But on the other hand, if the Cleveland Browns win this game, the Ravens will be 2 games behind the Browns, and ultimately not even be a wild card contention team. I say this because I believe one of the wild card teams would be the Titans or the Colts. Depending on how the Colts play today against the Packers, we'll see. And if the Ravens lose 2 of their next 4 games or 3 games, I bet the Colts will probably have a better record than them. Meaning the Ravens need to tie the Colts to get that wild card. But I think the Colts should have a better record than the Ravens at this point in time. Like I said, if the Ravens lose against the Browns, that means the Browns will definitely have a wild card spot. Probably number 5 or number 6. And I give number 5 or 6 to the Browns or the Colts, respectively. Now, if the Colts end up winning the AFC South, that is really, really bad for the Ravens because the Titans will be a wild card spot. And if the Titans and the Ravens finish the season with the same record, the Titans will have the tiebreaker, ultimately kicking the Ravens out of the playoffs. But who will that 7th seed be? Will it be the Ravens? Will it be the Dolphins? Will it be the Raiders? Let's find out. So if you're wondering, do the Ravens play either of these teams? They do not. And ultimately that could be bad because head-to-head record is very important in playoff seeding. But we look at the Dolphins, who are surprisingly winning games. Assuming they beat the Broncos today, which I think is a really high possibility, the Dolphins will be 7-3. And that's important. But we also look at the Raiders. And if they beat the Chiefs today, which I don't know, maybe they could, they will also be 7-3. But I believe the Raiders will lose to the Chiefs. A very important game for the Ravens is actually a game they're not playing in. It's a game with the Raiders playing the Dolphins. I honestly believe, with 100% honesty, whoever loses the Raiders-Dolphins game is immediately kicked out of the playoffs, and there's no possibility that they will make a playoff spot. That is just how I see it. I believe both of these teams, the Raiders and the Dolphins, will end the season with similar records, meaning whoever wins that game gets a head-to-head advantage and, seeding in the wild card spots. And the Raiders or the Dolphins will get that 7th seed in the playoffs. The only way the Ravens will win this tiebreaker over the Raiders or the Dolphins is conference record. And the Ravens ultimately have lost every game to AFC opponents. It's basically unfair because the Ravens, they play the NFC East. It's 4 free wins a season for every team in the AFC North. Meaning every loss the Ravens will suffer will be against an AFC opponent, which at the end of the day is really bad for the Ravens seeding in the playoffs. So if the Ravens actually want to make the playoffs, they got to beat Pittsburgh. They got to beat Cleveland. They just got to hope to God that other teams in the wild card do not get a better record than them. Comment down below if you think Baltimore actually might fall out of the playoffs and not even with 7 teams and a 14-2 record last season, not even make the playoffs. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Adios.